Hello dear students, this is Dr. Shabana Begum, Associate Professor in Zoology, Maharani Science College for Women, Bangalore, presenting a lecture on the topic Population Ecology, Session 8, pertaining to BSc Zoology 5th semester under the paper entitled Environmental Biology and Ethology. Students, in my previous lecture on population ecology, session 7, I had discussed about the meaning of population and its 4 attributes or characteristics such as the density, natality, mortality and age distribution, from which I am sure you have learnt about the major role played by natality and immigration in increasing the population density, while mortality and emigration decreasing it. Further, you have learnt that the ratio of age groups in a population determines the reproductive status of a population and also may indicate what is expected in future. Today, I am going to discuss few more attributes of a population such as the population growth, the growth curves, then population dispersion, biotic potential and population regulation. So first slide itself will give you an insight about the meaning of population, then the schematic diagram depicting the population regulation, where you can mention the births and immigration increases the population size while the deaths and emigration decreases it. As I just mentioned, these are the 4 factors which affect the population growth. The contents being population growth and growth curves, to discuss about population dispersion, biotic potential as well as the population regulation. And the learning objectives are to understand the population attributes with the population growth and growth curves, population dispersion, biotic potential and population regulation, and also to explicit the factors that affect the size and growth of the population. So, about population growth, you know the growth is the most fundamental dynamic feature that a species population display. And all populations change in size with time, and if births exceed deaths, the population grows, and if deaths exceed births, the population shrinks. Only when births equal deaths does the population stay the same. The other factors such as immigration and emigration will also change the size of the population. Malthus, a famous economist, wrote that human population growth tended to be exponential, whereas agricultural growth tended to be arithmetic, that is linear. Some more terms you should remember. What is the definition of demography? So, demography is the scientific study of human population. At present, human population in India is about 1.3 billion. What is population explosion? So, you can say the unlimited growth of the human population is called population explosion, while rapid decline in population is called population crash. So, there is one more term you should remember, carrying capacity, which is defined as feeding capacity of an environment of an ecosystem for a population of a species under provided set of conditions. It is also defined as the level beyond which no major increase can occur. Now, let's learn more about population growth. So, population growth is the increase in the number of individuals in a population. When an organism is placed in a new habitat that is favorable, the population size will increase slowly at first. That's called lag phase because there are few individuals in the beginning. As reproduction continues, the number of individuals will multiply rapidly. That's called exponential phase because more of them are giving birth at any given time. The characteristic growth of a population is represented by population growth curves. Such a curve can be actually plotted if the number of the animals is noted against time factor. The two modes of population growth are, the first one is the J curve or exponential curve, which are characterized by slow growth at first followed by an explosion of very rapid growth. The second one being the logistic curve, also known as sigmoid or S curve, which shows the effect of a limiting factor. In this particular slide, the first graph will represent J curve, while the second one will represent the S curve, that is the exponential growth and the logistic growth of population are represented. Now let's learn more about J-shaped curve. So in J-shaped growth form, the population grows exponentially, and after attaining the peak value, the population may abruptly crash. This increase in population is continued till large amount of food materials exist in the habitat. And after some time, due to increase in population size, food supply in the habitat becomes limited, which ultimately results in decrease in population size. For example, many insect populations show explosive increase in the numbers during the rainy season, followed by their disappearance at the end of the season. This is also shown in case of algae, which grows rapidly and seasonally due to eutrophication or enrichment of the water body, which are also called as blooms. And after the rapid growth phase, the algae disappear due to lack of space or oxygen or change of season. The growth is stopped by environmental factors called environmental resistance, and the growth is called density independent as the growth rate is not due to population density till the end is reached when it crashes. The following equation exhibits J-shaped growth, that is dn by dt is equal to Rn, where dn by dt represents rate of change in population size, R is the biotic potential, and N represents the population size. Let's discuss about S-shaped or sigmoid curve. So, when a few organisms are introduced in an area, the population increase is very slow in the beginning, that is positive acceleration phase or lag phase. In the middle phase, the population increase becomes very rapid, that is logarithmic phase, and finally in the last phase, the population increase is slowed down, that is negative acceleration phase, until an equilibrium is attained, around which the population size fluctuates according to variability of environment. S-shaped growth form is seen in newly developing populations. The growth begins slowly and then increases up to a certain point, after which the population remains steady, that is reaches an equilibrium state, and the growth does not increase or decrease. It is studied in protozoans such as paramecia, bacteria and yeast cultured in laboratory. It's also seen in populations of rabbits which were introduced into a new area and due to abundance of space, food and mates steadily increase and then maintain an equilibrium state. The introduction of rice weevils and mites into a new habitat with lots of space and food and no predators also show a S-shaped growth form. S-curve or S-shaped growth form is called density dependent, as the growth rate depends on the number of individuals present in the population. When the growth reaches the stable state and growth rate is 0, which is the maximum carrying capacity of the given environment for the population. It is represented by the following equation: dn by dt is equals to Rn, where dn by dt is the rate of change in population size, R is the biotic potential, N is the population size, and 1 minus N by K is for environmental resistance. This slide will depict a very famous theory called Malthusian theory of population. In fact, the first significant contribution to the theory of population was that of a well-known economist, the Thomas Robert Malthus, in the year 1798. He wrote that human population growth tended to be exponential, whereas agricultural growth tended to be arithmetic, that is linear. Malthus believed that through preventive checks and positive checks, the population would be controlled to balance the food supply with the population level. The schematic representation of the theory proposed by Malthus is depicted in this figure. Please go through it little later. The next attribute being population dispersion, which is also very important. The word meaning of dispersion is distribution. So here it is the spatial distribution of individuals within the population. So the spatial pattern of individuals in a population relative to one another is called dispersion. The population in a given area is dispersed or distributed in several ways. There are the three basic patterns of dispersions. These are also called as theoretical distribution patterns for non-human populations, such as uniform dispersion, random dispersion, and clumped dispersion. In case of uniform dispersion, also known as regular dispersion, the individuals of a population are regularly arranged and more or less spaced at equal distance from one another. This is rare in nature but is common in managed systems such as cropland, in fields or orchards. And also animals with territorial behavior tend towards this type of regular dispersion. Here the example is depicted in the first figure. Example being the birds nesting in small islands such as penguins often exhibit uniform spacing maintained by aggressive interactions between neighbors. The second type of dispersion is the random dispersion. Here the position of one individual is unrelated to the position of its neighbors. This is also rare in nature. So the second diagram here represents random dispersion pattern. Here the example being the dandelions, which grow from wind-blown seeds that land at random and later germinate. The third type of dispersion pattern is called clumped dispersion. It is seen when the individuals are grouped together in one part of the area where there is a lot of space between the groups, and such an aggregations may result from social aggregations such as family groups, or may be due to certain patches of the environment being more favorable for the population concerned. The example here is cited, which is here you can mention the wolves living in groups increases the effectiveness of hunting, spreads the work of protecting and caring for young, and helps to exclude other individuals from their territory. Some more information regarding population dispersion, as we have already mentioned. So it is the spatial distribution of individuals within the population, and it is of three types. Uniform dispersion, also known as regular dispersion. Here the individuals are separated by a fairly even distance. It occurs as a result of social interaction where individuals trying to get as far away from each other as possible, and if there are limited resources, competitions among themselves and for nesting. Then in a nutshell you can say in this uniform dispersion the individuals of the population are evenly spaced. The second one being random dispersion. Here the location of one individual is independent of the location of the other individuals. The example being the seed dispersal by the wind or animals. So you can say here in this case the individuals of the population are unpredictably spaced. The third one is the clumped dispersion. Here the individuals are clustered together, and it occurs when resources like the food, water, living spaces are clumped together and the species have a certain social behavior. For example, herding animals, flocks of birds, schools of fish, hives of bees, etc. So in a nutshell you can say the clumped dispersion pattern will be exhibited by individuals which are clustered in specific parts of the habitat. The next attribute of the population is biotic potential. So this term was proposed by Chapman in the year 1928, and he used the term biotic potential for the maximum reproductive power. Each population, as we know, has the inherent power to grow. So biotic potential can be defined as the inherent property or capacity of an organism to reproduce and increase in number. It's the maximum reproductive capacity of an organism under optimum environmental conditions. And according to the ecologist R.N Chapman in the year 1928, the biotic potential could be divided into reproductive and survival potential. For example, an oyster can lay about 100 into 10 to the power of 6 eggs. A cod can lay about 9 into 10 to the power of 6 eggs. A salmon fish can lay about 14 into 10 to the power of 4 eggs. If all the eggs survive and hatch, the earth would have been full of only oysters, cods and salmons. But environmental conditions do not allow all the eggs or fries to survive. In the migratory salmons, at every stage, the mortality rate is high. So, only a few salmons survive to reproductive age to increase tremendously, and such a condition is called biotic potential. But the number is kept in check due to environmental resistance. So thus, the size of a population depends on the biotic potential and the environmental resistance. It may be designated by the symbol R, which is the exponent in the differential equation for population growth in an unlimited environment under specific physical conditions. The index R is the difference between the instantaneous specific natality rate and the instantaneous specific death rate, and may be expressed as R is equals to B minus D. The biotic potential of a population depends on several other factors such as the reproductive capacity of the individual, the number of individuals in the population, the age of individuals, then the lifespan of the individuals, the different physical conditions of the environment, and the population density. The factors that limit the biotic potential of an organism are called environmental resistance. These factors include abiotic and biotic factors that limit the organism from endlessly increasing its population. The biotic factors include predation, competition, parasitism, and diseases. Then the number of individuals is equals to biotic potential divided by resistance of the environment, which is biotic and abiotic. The biotic potential of a population can be calculated by the formula Rn is equals to delta n divided by n delta t, where R is the reproductive potential of an individual and n is the number of individuals present at that time. For example, if each female rice weevil produces 100 eggs and if there are 20 females, the biotic potential is equal to Rn, which is equals to 100 into 20, which is equal to 200. Also, we should know it is not just enough to calculate the number of individuals to estimate the biotic potential. Why? Because the individuals need to be in the reproductive age, and not all the individuals are in the reproductive age. Some may be in the pre-reproductive age and some may be in the post-reproductive age in a population. Next, let us learn more about the population regulation. So, regulation of population size. As I have already mentioned, the populations are regulated by a complex interaction of biotic and abiotic influences. In case of density independent populations, birth rate and death rates do not change with population density. For example, in dune fescue grass, environmental conditions kill a similar proportion of individuals regardless of density. In contrast, in case of density dependent populations, birth rates fall and death rates rise with population density. However, density dependent population regulation are much more common than density independent. Some of the density dependent factors are the computation, herbivory, predation, parasitism, then stress from overcrowding, etc. So let us learn about each in 2-3 lines. Then first is computation. So here you know the word meaning of computation. Computation is the competing, that is the fighting for space, food, water, sunlight, mates, etc. And the computation can be within the same or different species, and thus they are called as intra-specific and interspecific computation respectively. Some will survive and reproduce in the computation, some will survive but not reproduce, and some will die during the computation. Next is herbivory. It's like predation actually. The predators to plant species. There is a large loss of plant species which may affect other primary consumers during this herbivory, which is a type of negative interspecific interaction. Next being predation, where there is always a cyclic relationship between a predator, which is quite strong and large animal, compared to a prey, which is a small meek organism. So during which there is always a rise of one may induce the fall of the other, that is predator and prey. The trend of rises and falls continues. The next factor is the parasitism. This is they feed at the expense of their host. So parasites feed at the expense of their host. So there are different types of parasites which are called as the ectoparasite, endoparasites, intercellular parasites, intracellular parasites, then also obligate parasites, then facultative parasites, plus you can always mention about the number of hosts the parasites require to complete this life cycle as monogenetic parasites and digenetic parasites. The example being the ticks feeding on the blood of dogs. So here the ticks are the ectoparasites. Then next one being the disease. So here one can cause a dramatic drop in a population due to infestation of a disease. A decrease in one population may trigger a rise in another because of the disease infestation. Finally, the stress from overcrowding is also a density dependent factor. Here, because of overcrowding, species, they fight among themselves and may lead to high levels of stress which may affect the organism's ability to fight the diseases. Some density independent factors are weather, in which you categorize hurricanes, droughts and floods, and natural disasters such as wildfires and tsunami. To know about environmental resistant factors, as we know, we have already discussed also, environmental resistant factors are the factors that limit the growth of a population. They include biotic factors like predators, then disease, competition, parasitism and lack of food, as well as abiotic factors like fire, flood and drought. The biotic potential of a population shows how well a species is able to survive. So, the environmental resistance is equal to the decrease factors, as all the factors acting jointly to limit the growth of a population. So, they determine carrying capacity, that is the K, the number of individuals of a given species that can be sustained indefinitely in a given area. The carrying capacity is determined by interplay of biotic potential and environmental resistance. Finally, the outcome of the study, as we have already studied about the two types of growth curves, that is the J and the S curve. So, J curve is also called exponential curve and S or sigmoid curve is called logistic curve. So, studying about these curves helps to understand or assess how organisms interact with each other and with their environments. Study of population growth helps to understand what causes changes in population sizes and growth rates. Study of population dispersion patterns such as uniform, random or clumped show the spatial relationship between the members of a population within a habitat. Population dispersal can help to regulate population size and density, that is the immigration, emigration and migration of individuals within a population. Finally, the biotic potential, which is the maximum reproductive capacity or ability of an organism under optimum environmental conditions. Organisms with a higher biotic potential are able to respond more quickly to changes in their environment compared to organisms with a lower biotic potential. Finally, there are few multiple choice questions. I want you to answer them just to know whether you have understood the lesson or not. The first question being, the maximum possible number of individuals that a habitat can support is called its. Options are A, fecundity, B, surviving ability, C, carrying capacity and D is biotic potential. The option, can you guess? Option C is the carrying capacity. Second question, the ability of a population to increase under ideal environmental conditions is called. Option A, natality, B, carrying capacity, C, biotic potential and D, the absolute natality. The answer option is C, that is biotic potential. Next question, the formula for exponential population growth is. Option A, dn by dt is equal to Rn, B, dt by dn is equals to Rn, C, dn by Rn is equals to dt and D is Rn divided by dn is equals to dt. So the answer option A, that is dn by dt is equals to Rn. The next, that is the fourth question. Human population growth curve is a option A, S-shaped curve, B, parabola curve, C, J-shaped curve, and D, zigzag curve. So the answer option is C, that is J-shaped curve. Next question, that is the fifth one. Which dispersion pattern is described by organisms being spaced out equally? The options are A, uniform, B, random, C, clumped, and D is none of these. So the answer is option A, that is uniform. Sixth question. According to Thomas Malthus, the population increases dash, food increases dash, and a food dash will result. So the options are A, arithmetically, exponentially, shortage, B, exponentially, arithmetically, shortage, C, arithmetically, exponentially, surplus, and D is exponentially, arithmetically, surplus. So the answer option B, that is exponentially, arithmetically, and shortage is the correct answer. You just have to fill up the gaps with these three words to get the correct answer. So finally, these are few references. You just go through them for further understanding of the lesson and clarifying your doubts. Thank you.